In the video for today, I'm going to be showing you how to do and use the basics of iWeb. iWeb is an application for creating websites. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by opening it up. And it normally will come up with this particular panel where you would pick your template. It is possible that it would come up and ask you for a domain file, that it cannot find one. The domain file, let me show you here with the Finder. The domain file is the file that contains all of the websites that you have in your iWeb application. What I mean by that is you can create multiple websites using iWeb. Those websites could be for different clients. They could go to different web servers. All of those would be contained in the single file called domain. That is typically located on your hard drive, under your users, whatever user you happen to be, in the library, application support, iWeb, and then you would see domain. This file can be located other places, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But for now, we're going to go ahead and continue working, leaving the domain where it is at. So with iWeb, as I said, it'll normally pop up and give you then this window where you can pick from different templates. iWeb makes things very easy. The intent is not for you to get into the nitty-gritty of creating web pages, but to focus on the design, the creation of that web page and that website. So it's very much template driven. So they have a number of provided templates. And with each of the overall designs, there are a number of different basic pages that you can pick from. So you'll see that with the white one, we've got a welcome page about me and photos. If we were to go to black, we would see relatively the same thing. And as we go down these different designs, we see a variety of different pages we can pick from. Normally, you would make your entire website consistent with the design, although technically you would not have to. Well, let's say we're going to choose maybe the goldenrod template for our particular website. I'm going to start with the welcome page. I'm going to go ahead and pick that and do choose. So it goes ahead and it adds that template page, now allowing me to make the necessary changes to the page as I want. So obviously I can change the text if I wanted to. I can go ahead and put in there whatever I would want to put. And again, I'm not going to focus on anything particular here. I'm just going to go ahead and put a bunch of characters. Picture I can change. Now, you may or may not see the media over here. And if you're not, that's because of this little button down at the very bottom. It says hide media or show media. And that'll cause this little bump out to appear. And in here we can look at different kinds of audio files, photos, movies, and widgets. Since we would be looking at replacing a photo, I would want to be on the Photos tab. So let's say I take this photo, I can simply drag and drop it in to that particular location. I can also modify this image as I would want to and need to. So if I click on it, you'll then see that I get this little adjustment panel or box. And one of the things I can do is change the magnification of this photo. So I don't want to grab a hold and make this bigger. I simply would take my slider and adjust it. If for some reason I wanted to change the size of this picture, not the magnification, but the size of it on the page, I would then use Edit Mask. That would allow me to make it then a different size. So this is a mask. Think of this as simply a piece of paper with an opening in it. The mask is the opening, so I'm revealing the picture through that opening. So I'm not going to see what's over in this area here. So if I click off, you'll see that outer part. I've simply cropped it in a sense, but it's the non-destructive form of cropping. So again, if I do Edit Mask, that allows me to change the size of this. I'm going to try to get it back reasonably well. Oop, didn't want to make that bigger. Okay. So it's a matter of just taking pictures and dropping them into an existing location. If I want to adjust something on them, just simply click on that image. It'll give you then your slider in your edit mask. Text, as I've already demonstrated, click on your text. You can go ahead and simply modify the text as you would normally do in many other applications. Okay. There are some different properties associated with many of these elements, and you can access those properties using the inspector. So down at the bottom, we have a number of different buttons, and one of them is labeled inspector, the one with the eye. If I click on that, and it was already actually open, but that button will open or close my inspector window. It allows me to look at a number of different elements. I can look at things regarding the page, photos. If we were doing something with blogs and podcasts, we have the RSS. We have some text kinds of elements. This is not necessarily where we would control the particular font, but more of the properties associated with the overall text. We can do things with graphics and measuring and rulers. We have link kinds of controls, and I'll mention those a little bit later. And then if we have some things with movies. If you wanted to change something with the text, if you simply select some portion of the text and right click, there is font. If you do show fonts, it's also available down here by doing fonts. That is where we would make the changes to those particular font types of elements, whether we're picking the font, the family of font, the typeface, size, color, those kinds of things. We make those kinds of changes using the font panel. I'm going to use what they've given me here in the template, so I'm not going to use that. Again, you can close it by just closing the panel. You can also close it by just clicking on the font button down at the bottom. So you would simply modify the page as needed. And you can also, if you wanted to add images to this text portion, you also could. Now, if all we did is take an image from our photos and drag it into here, that is not a part of the text, and the text will not wrap around it. If you want the text to wrap around an image, and I'm going to take this image, I'm going to cut it. So I'm going to cut it out of there. And then you would simply paste it in the text. So I've selected where I wanted to paste it. I'm going to then choose paste. And you can see then that that is now embedded within that text, and then the text wraps around it. All right. So I don't really want that in there. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Let's say that I want some additional pages with my particular website. So those are going to be shown all on this left side. Right now the name of my website is simply site. We can change it if we wanted to. This first page that I've created is called welcome. I could change it if I wanted to. You'll see the name of the page corresponds to the link to it here. So we could change it. We normally keep those short. But if I want to add a page, I'll come down here to my lower left corner of my application where it says add page. And I'm going to want to stick normally with the same design. But let's say I want to put in here a blog page. So I pick blog, do choose. You'll then see that it added some additional elements. Blogs are a little bit different. Let me explain the different elements that we have here. This topmost one, this is the blog summary page. On the summary page, all we can change is this upper portion. Below it shows some blog entries, but we can't change them on the blog summary page. All we can do is change this information picture that's up at the top. So this is normally a description of what your blog is about, not a specific blog entry, but what your blog is about. Likewise, the picture relates to the blog overall, not to a specific entry. We can control some of the elements associated with this. As I mentioned in the inspector, there is a thing associated with the RSS. One of the subcategories is blog, so we can control whether or not we would have a search element there or not, the excerpt length, those kinds of elements. Those are controlled through the inspector. Now, if we want to modify the actual entries, we've got to go to the entries portion of this page. So I'm going to click on entries. We now get to that specific entry. I can now manipulate and control the image associated with this blog entry. I can manipulate the text associated with this blog entry. So let's say then I take and change this page to have this picture, and I change this text. If I now go back to the blog summary page, you'll see that this has changed because I changed it on the blog entry page. So on the blog summary page, all you can change is this portion up here. The entries are modified using the entry page. So let's say I want to add additional entries. All I would do is add an entry, give it some name. So maybe I want to name this entry flying high. Oops, all caps, we don't want that. Notice it changed the title down here. I could replace the picture with something else. Change the text if I needed to. Change the text down here. So now I have two blog entries. If I were to go back to my blog summary, it's going to show those. The entries are modified on the entries page. Archive, don't worry about that. There's nothing really there that you can change. This is done and handled automatically. So the only place you'll make changes is on the blog page and on the blog entry page. All right. If you need to reorder pages, because the order of the pages determines the order here in this navigation, you would simply take and drag them to a different location. So now you'll see blog comes before welcome. Now you'll see the same being true on my menu, my navigation. But I want my blog to come after my welcome. It is more logical for the welcome to come before the actual blog entry. As I add other pages, those will show up across my navigation unless I tell it to exclude it from the navigation menu. So I can control that here, and sometimes there are cases where we want that to happen. If I have, let me just add a page here. Let's say I have an About Me page. And I would want that, let's say maybe right there. If I then decide, I don't want this page to be there. I want to get rid of it completely. Don't want anything associated with it. I simply want to delete it. So pick the page. We could rename it. Pick the page, and then just simply hit delete, and that page will be deleted. As I showed you, you could rename pages. Simply click again. This is my welcome page. I would not normally use that for a page name, because here's why. We've got spaces in between these words, and it's customary that there would be spaces in our navigation to differentiate one link from another. So it gets confusing as to what exactly is the link and what isn't. So my recommendation is to keep your page names to a single word, like welcome. All right, let's see here. So showed you how to create the template, add pages, how we can change the text, how we can replace images. One note on that, my images are located in here. You still have to watch. There can be issues with file names in iWeb. The biggest issue you will have, it won't cause you a problem until you go to publish, are spaces and special characters in your file names. What you do not want to do is simply go into your browser and go into Google and then Google some picture, let's say plane, and go to images and say, oh, there's a picture that I want. I'm going to take it and I'm going to drag it from here to here. Because first of all, it may make a link of it. Second of all, if it does take it, some people drag it to maybe the desktop and then take and drag it up to here. And that one's probably not working so good. Let me find a different one. Let's go to these are creating links. Oh. Well, anyway, if you take and drag it from an application into here and the file name's not correct, when you go to publish, you'll get an error. So my recommendation is drag the image, save it to the desktop, clean up the file name, make it really simple, no spaces, no special characters, then drag it from the desktop or wherever you have it and into your application. All right. So let's say we've got our multiple pages, we've got our images and everything in there. So we're good there. Now, before we can do anything, put this to the website. Right now, this exists only on my computer. This does not exist on any web server. So I'm going to go to the very top level that says right now, site. This is the information that iWeb will use for publishing your website to a web server. What we want to use is an FTP server. FTP is I'm having trouble talking here. File Transfer Protocol. It's a way of getting files from one computer to another computer. So we're going to use that. Site name. This simply corresponds to whatever you want your site called. You can name it whatever you want. My recommendation is keep it short. Don't use spaces. No special characters. The contact email is optional. You do not have to put that in. The server address is going to depend upon where you are putting your website. For you in my class, GCM 180, you're going to be using the CalU web server, so it's going to be students.calu.edu. Everybody will use that. The username will be CalUPA / and then whatever your username is. So that's typically the 3 letters and the 4 numbers. Nothing else after that, just like that, except you replace it with your username. The password, you could put your password in, the one that corresponds to your account at Cal. My recommendation is to leave it blank. It will prompt you for the password. Leave the directory and path empty, leave it as FTP, then go ahead and test your connection. It should come through saying, okay, I don't have an account on students.calu, so I can't hit test and check it out. Make sure that this works. You won't be able to publish until this is functioning. You will also want to put in your website URL so that you can test it and so that the RSS feeds are correct. For you, it's going to be http://students.calu.edu/ and then whatever you put in for your username, this portion only. For mine, it would be ABC. This part would be ABC 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing else beyond that. You'll see that when I changed the name of the site, it also changed the name up here. It also changed the icon corresponding to it now being FTP server rather than MobileMe. What this now allows you to do is to publish the site. Again, I don't have a valid server address and username in here, so I can't do that, but you would click on Publish Site. It would then take and create the necessary pages for this to be able to display on a web server, and it would go to the particular location that you would want. Once it got done, if it went through successfully, it would then give you a prompt of whether or not you want to visit your site. And you could click on Visit, and it would go ahead and you could check it out and make sure that everything's working. Afterwards, you could always visit it by going here, or you could visit it by going to this particular location. When it creates those files, let me actually change something here to show you. I'm going to change it to local folder. And I'm going to put it on my desktop. And let me create a new folder. Let me call it test. Because I can publish this to my desktop, so if I now do publish, it's going through that process. It is not putting it on a web server. I can visit my site. This is what normally would come up if you had it for a web server as well. But this is on my desktop. This is not on the web server. Nobody else has access to this website. So this is fine for local testing, but this does not get it out to the world to be able to see. Again, you'll see that it's giving me a local address, not a web server address. Oftentimes on a website, the file name associated with the home page would be your index.html. So that's commonly used. So if you go to a web server, you're looking for the home page, you typically look for that index.html. You'll also notice that there are some other elements here. If I look in my media panel, there's also widgets. So there are things that can also be inserted into your web page, like a RSS feed, countdown, maps, those kinds of things. And they've made it sort of easy. They got snippets of code that make it very easy to add those kinds of elements. Just back real quickly to the FTP server. I mentioned that I prefer leaving the password blank. The reason for that is then every time you go to publish, it will prompt you for the password. That provides a little bit of protection so that if somebody had your domain, that password is not going to be embedded in that domain and they would not have the ability to modify your web pages. So my recommendation is to keep it a little bit more secure, omit the password. But the inconvenience is it'll prompt you for that every single time. All right. So let's say we have this all done. It's saved. You'll notice that there is no save as. So iWeb and a lot of the iLife packages makes things very convenient and easy. They don't want you messing around with files. So that can be a problem if you're trying to back up certain things. So let me show you where those are at. Always, whenever you're going to mess with files, make sure the application that uses those files is closed. So I'm not just closed, but actually quit out of that application. So I'm going to quit iWeb. I'm going to go back into my browser. So if I go into my Finder, so here in my hard drive, I can get there a couple ways. Here's my hard drive. I've gone to the users. I've gone to me as the user, into the library, into application support, iWeb, and then here's my domain. That is my file that contains my website. I could also click on my little home. That gets me there without having to go into a couple of those folders. But again, library, application support, and iWeb. Let's say that I move this domain. I can do that. There's now no domain in this location. I can rename this domain if I wanted to. Let's go and call it my website. If I now double click on this, it'll automatically load that particular domain. Make sure that you have this file backed up. This will contain a semester's worth of work. You do not want to lose it. You want to be able to access it. Be careful you don't accidentally overwrite it. Very important to be able to manage your files correctly. All right, so that's the basics of using iWeb. I hope this was helpful to you, and good luck.